really good inflation news, which has a lot of people saying that maybe that soft landing that our economy was hopefully supposed to achieve has happened. I think it might be a little soon to make that call, but the news today is excellent. It comes to us via the Consumer Price Index, which is just an index of prices. Inflation is just prices rising, so this tracks those prices all across the economy. It's a pretty amazing process, actually. And the CPI, as they call it, rose 0.2% in July. And if you extrapolate that out across the year, that has inflation at a rate of 2.9% per year. That is the lowest inflation rate we have seen since the spring of 2021. So this is really big news. And if you look at the core CPI, as they call it, which is just looking at prices except taking out food and energy, because those two things tend to be more volatile, the core inflation rate is 3.2%, which is also the lowest it's been since the spring of 2021. And I've been hearing a lot of people saying, if everyone's talking about how great this news is, like, why am I still paying $8 for my coffee? Well, this is the thing about inflation. It is not prices, it is just prices rising. So when the inflation rate comes down, it just means the prices are rising more slowly than they were, not that they are actually going down. And I know this is maybe going to sound like sacrilege, but we don't really want to see prices drop. When prices drop across the economy, it is something called deflation, and that is very terrible. People stop buying things, businesses grind to a halt, etc. So we actually want a little bit of inflation. Now, the Federal Reserve's target rate of inflation, what they're aiming for, they think the sweet spot is 2%. That's prices rising 2% a year. So that means companies are making a little bit more money every year. So they're growing, they're happy. And customers are not noticing it, right? If your coffee gets 2% more expensive a year, you're probably not gonna notice. So 2% is considered the sweet spot. And that is actually quite recent. In fact, it was Janet Yellen who brought this up in a Federal Reserve meeting under Fed Chair at the time, Alan Greenspan. She proposed the 2% inflation rate because at the time, there was conventional wisdom at the Fed, the Federal Reserve, which controls these things, that you want inflation to be zero. Which seems right? I mean, as a customer, I would like inflation to be zero. And what Janet Yellen argued and what has become conventional wisdom since then was, no, we don't want inflation to be zero. We want prices to be rising a little bit because that brings more money into companies. Companies can expand, the economy can grow, but prices are rising at a rate that most customers won't notice. It won't affect their lives. It won't have them making difficult purchasing decisions like a lot of us have had to make over the last few years. So the good news is inflation seems to be coming down. It seems to be coming under control. This is what Jerome Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve, has been aiming for months and months and months, of keeping interest rates so high, which has been quite painful for the economy. But it seems like maybe that period of austerity could be coming to an end. The bad news, though, is that this does not mean that your coffee is going to get any cheaper. It just will get more expensive a lot more slowly, which is exactly what economists say is the best thing for an economy. That is prices rising slowly at, ideally, a rate of 2%.